She never thought she would be in that room, under all those lights, with so many people watching her every move. Music was always her safe place, a world where she could be alone and free. She would sit at the piano for hours, letting her fingers dance over the keys, pouring her thoughts and feelings into melodies that no one else would hear. She never imagined that the quiet passion she held in her heart would ever be tested in front of others, that the world outside her small practice room would ever notice. It started as an ordinary afternoon, one where she thought she would simply enjoy the soft sunlight through the windows and the gentle hum of life around her. She had been invited to a gathering, a formal event, where people with talent were expected to perform. But she had always believed she was just an amateur, someone who played for herself. She arrived quietly, hoping to blend in, to be just another face in the crowd, unnoticed and unbothered. But fate had other plans. Before she could settle into the corner, someone noticed her sitting with a calm demeanor, hands that hinted at a familiarity with the piano, and eyes that carried an unspoken depth. There was a whisper, a glance, and then a polite but firm request. Would she play? A complex piece had been chosen, one known to challenge even the most skilled musicians. The piece was intricate, full of sharp movements, deep emotions, and swift transitions. It was not a song for casual players, and everyone around assumed that she would struggle. It was a test, an unspoken challenge. And she was caught in the middle of it. Her heart raced, and she felt a wave of panic she had not expected. The room was quiet, all eyes turning toward her. Some faces were curious, others skeptical, and a few wore faint smirks, thinking this would be entertaining at her expense. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She wanted to say no, to excuse herself, and slip back into anonymity. But something inside told her that she could not. Refusing would only add to the whispers, the judgment, the assumption that she was unworthy. She had to play. As she approached the piano, every step felt heavier than the last. She could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. The instrument stood there, shining under the lights, almost intimidating in its grandeur. Her hands hovered over the keys, and for a moment she doubted herself completely. Could she really do this? Could she perform a piece that had been written for trained hands? For seasoned musicians? For people far more confident than she felt herself to be? Memories of her private practice came flooding back. Nights spent alone, practicing scales over and over, learning to feel the music rather than just play notes. The hours she had spent perfecting small passages. Oh, the frustration of repeating the same mistakes. The quiet satisfaction of finally getting it right. She had done this alone, without an audience, without recognition. And yet here she was, suddenly thrust into the spotlight. The contrast between the comfort of solitude and the weight of expectation was overwhelming. She sat on the piano bench, her fingers gently resting on the keys, feeling the smooth surface beneath her touch. The first few moments were the hardest, filled with hesitation and doubt. She closed her eyes for a second, taking a deep breath, trying to center herself. She remembered why she loved music in the first place. How it had been her companion through lonely nights, her escape from the noise of the world, and her way of expressing emotions she could not put into words. If she could hold on to that feeling, perhaps she could navigate this unexpected challenge. The room was silent, each person watching intently, waiting for the first note. Some were patient, expecting failure, while others were genuinely curious, sensing a potential hidden beneath the quiet exterior. The pressure was immense, and she could feel it pressing down on her shoulders, making her hands shake slightly. She told herself that it was normal, that even the best performers felt this way before they began. She just had to start. Her fingers touched the keys, tentative at first, playing the opening notes softly. The sound was delicate, almost fragile, but it was there, real and honest. She allowed herself to sink into the music, to let her training and instinct guide her. The initial tension in her body began to ease, replaced by a focus so sharp it felt almost like clarity. Every movement of her hands, every press of the keys, was a conversation with the instrument, a dialogue she had practiced countless times in solitude. As the piece unfolded, she began to feel a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. The music was complex, demanding precision and emotion, and she had to navigate it with care. Mistakes were not an option, and yet, the more she played, the more the music seemed to guide her. She remembered the advice given by her first piano teacher: music is not just notes on a page. It is feeling, it is heart, it is telling a story. She started to tell her story through the piece. Each note a reflection of her journey, each chord a testament to the years of quiet dedication. The audience began to notice. At first there were murmurs, whispers of doubt, but as the melody continued, those whispers faded. Eyes widened, some faces softened, and the skeptical smirks disappeared. People were no longer watching to see if she would fail. They were watching, captivated by the unfolding music. It was a subtle shift. Almost imperceptible at first, but it was there. A change in the energy of the room, a recognition that something extraordinary was happening. Despite the growing attention, she remained focused on the piano, her world narrowed to the keys and the music. Every section of the piece required different emotions, from soft, reflective passages to rapid, intricate sequences. She had learned to control her emotions through practice, and now she channeled them into her performance. The nervousness that had gripped her at first transformed into a quiet determination, resolved to honor the music and her own capabilities. Time seemed to blur. She lost track of the minutes, caught up in the flow of the piece. The initial fear that had threatened to paralyze her melted away, replaced by a rhythm, a connection between her mind, her fingers, and the piano. She realized that the audience's presence, which had felt oppressive at first, had become almost irrelevant. The music was her world now, and nothing outside it mattered. She could feel the story within the notes, the emotions embedded in each chord, and she let herself live in them fully. There were moments where the complexity of the piece challenged her, where her fingers slipped or hesitated, but she did not falter. Instead, she embraced each challenge, allowing the music to guide her through. Every mistake became an opportunity to express herself differently, to turn a potential flaw into a part of the performance. She was no longer playing just to meet expectations. She was playing to be herself, to share her inner world with anyone willing to listen. The audience's silence was heavy but not uncomfortable. It was a silence filled with anticipation, with curiosity, with a growing respect. People began to realize that this was no ordinary performance. The girl who had seemed so ordinary, so quiet, was revealing a depth of talent that no one had anticipated. Each note was precise, each passage flowing naturally into the next. The music carried not only technical skill, but emotion, vulnerability, and strength. It was a rare combination that held the listener spellbound. As the final measures approached, she felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. The piece had demanded everything from her, and she had given it fully. Her hands were tired, her mind alert, and her heart full. She struck the last chord with a gentle yet confident touch, letting it resonate and fade into silence. For a moment, there was only quiet, the room holding its breath, suspended in the aftermath of what had just been played. Then, slowly, reactions began to emerge. Eyes widened, mouths opened slightly in surprise, and a few people exchanged looks that spoke of disbelief and admiration. She remained seated, letting the silence stretch, allowing the impact of the performance to sink in. She did not seek approval. She did not need applause to validate her efforts. The music itself had spoken, and that was enough. This first part of the story was not just about playing a piano piece. It was about facing unexpected pressure, confronting doubt, and discovering the strength that had always been within. It was about the quiet power of preparation and dedication. The way private passion can become public revelation when the moment demands it. She had been forced into the spotlight, yes, but in doing so, she had uncovered something essential about herself. Her talent was real. Her dedication was true, and her ability to rise to a challenge was stronger than she had imagined. As she finally stood from the piano, she felt a strange sense of calm. The room's attention had shifted, and while there was still curiosity and surprise, she knew that she had proved something important. Not to the audience, not to those who had doubted her, but to herself. She had faced a moment she never expected, one that could have crushed her confidence, and instead, she had embraced it. She had allowed her music, her truth, to emerge fully. And it had transformed the room, if only for a brief, unforgettable moment. The journey was far from over, but this first step had already shown the world and herself the remarkable talent she carried quietly within. She stepped away from the piano for a moment, letting her mind wander through the memories that had carried her to this point. Music had always been more than notes and scales. It had been her companion, a quiet friend that understood her without asking questions. The long hours she spent practicing alone were not about showing off or impressing anyone. They were about survival, about creating a space where she could be herself, and about learning to communicate the feelings she could never speak aloud. As a child, she had discovered the piano in a dusty corner of an old music shop. The keys seemed to call to her, inviting her to explore, to touch, to learn. She had no teacher at first, no one to guide her. She learned by listening, by watching, by trying and failing repeatedly. Each mistake was a lesson, each small success a triumph. Her parents were supportive but busy, leaving her to explore her passion quietly. The solitude allowed her to focus, to develop an understanding of music that went beyond theory. She learned to feel the rhythm, to sense the emotion behind the notes, to let her heart guide her fingers. In those quiet moments, she discovered a truth about herself. Talent alone was not enough. Dedication, patience, and an ability to listen to the music, to her own instincts, were just as important. She spent years refining her skill, sometimes growing frustrated, sometimes overwhelmed by the complexity of certain pieces. But she never gave up. Every night, she returned to the piano, driven by a love she could not explain, a need to express herself in a way words never could. The memory of her first public performance came back vividly. It had been a small gathering, friends and neighbors sitting in folding chairs, listening politely. She had been nervous, her hands shaking as she approached the piano. But as soon as she played the first notes, something shifted. The music flowed naturally, and the nervousness melted away. People had applauded, but more than that, she had felt a sense of accomplishment, a confirmation that her quiet practice had real value. That feeling stayed with her, a quiet reminder of what she could achieve when she trusted herself. Back in the present, standing in the room filled with curious eyes, she recalled that same feeling. The challenge she faced now was much greater than anything she had done before. The piece she had been asked to play was complex and demanding. Each measure required precision, each phrase carried emotion, and the transitions between sections could be unforgiving. Yet, she also remembered the countless hours of practice, the mistakes that had taught her resilience, and the quiet victories that had shaped her confidence. She realized that she was not unprepared. She had been ready all along. She just needed to believe it. She closed her eyes for a moment, picturing the piano in her mind. The keys were familiar, almost like old friends waiting for her return. She thought of the evenings she had spent practicing, the music that had filled her small room, and the sense of peace she had found there. It was a comforting thought, a reminder that even in this room full of strangers, she had the ability to create her own world through the piano. That world was hers to command. It could not be taken from her. The weight of expectation in the room was still there, but it no longer felt oppressive. She understood that fear and pressure were natural reactions, but they did not define her. She had faced challenges before, small and large, and had emerged stronger each time. This moment was just another test, another opportunity to prove not to others, but to herself, that she could rise to the occasion. She reminded herself that music was about expression, about honesty, and that if she played from her heart, the audience would feel it. She remembered her first teacher, an elderly woman with patience and wisdom, who had taught her that mistakes were not failures but opportunities. Music is a living thing, the teacher had said, and it will forgive you if you treat it with respect and honesty. Those words had stayed with her. Every time she stumbled during practice, she would hear that voice, encouraging her to try again, to focus on the emotion rather than the perfection. It was a philosophy that had shaped her approach to music and, in many ways, to life itself. As she prepared to sit down at the piano again, she thought of the countless pieces she had learned, each one a stepping stone in her journey. She remembered the slow, deliberate practice of difficult passages, the patience required to master complex rhythms, and the joy of finally playing a piece flawlessly after weeks of struggle. Every success had been quiet, unnoticed by the world, but it had built a foundation that no challenge could shake. She was ready. She just had to trust in the work she had already done. When she sat at the piano once more, the room seemed to fade away. The lights, the faces, the whispers, all of it, became background noise as she focused on the keys in front of her. She let her fingers hover for a moment, feeling the texture of the keys and recalling the countless hours spent in similar positions. She drew a deep breath, centering herself, and allowed the first notes to flow naturally. The music began softly, tentative yet deliberate. Carrying the weight of her preparation and the sincerity of her heart, with each passing measure, her confidence grew. The notes were no longer just notes. They were expressions of her journey, her struggles, and her triumphs. The room, which had seemed intimidating moments before, now felt like a space where her music could live and breathe. She was not playing for approval or recognition. She was playing to share a piece of herself, to connect with the world in a way only music could allow. Every chord, every transition, was a reflection of her dedication and her understanding of the piano. As an extension of herself, the audience began to notice the change. Initial skepticism gave way to curiosity, and curiosity turned into genuine attention. People leaned forward slightly, drawn by the honesty and skill in her performance. They could sense that this was not a casual display, not a simple performance for entertainment. This was someone sharing years of dedication, someone revealing the truth about their talent in a way that words could never convey. The room felt lighter, charged with a subtle energy that came from witnessing something real and unexpected. She allowed herself to sink fully into the music, letting it guide her through the complex passages of the piece. The technical challenges, which had seemed daunting before, were now manageable through focus and instinct. She embraced the difficulties, using them to deepen the emotional impact of the performance. Each note carried intention, each phrase told a story, and the audience could feel the depth behind every movement. It was a powerful reminder that preparation, patience, and passion were inseparable from true talent. As the performance continued, she reflected on how far she had come. The shy, uncertain girl who had first discovered the piano in that old music shop was no longer the same person. She had grown through years of practice, perseverance, and quiet determination. The challenges she faced had shaped her, taught her resilience, and strengthened her connection to music. Now, in this unexpected moment of pressure, she was able to draw on all that experience, turning potential fear into strength and hesitation into artistry. The room's energy continued to shift. People who had doubted her or underestimated her skill now watched with genuine admiration. They could see the years of quiet dedication manifesting in every movement of her hands. The careful control, the emotion, and the story embedded in the music. It was a transformation not just for her, but for everyone in the room. She had turned a moment of potential embarrassment into a demonstration of talent, courteousy, and courage. Every time her fingers moved across the keys, she felt a sense of liberation. The piano was not just an instrument. It was a voice, a medium through which she could communicate without words. She realized that the fear she had felt earlier was natural, but it had not defined her. She had faced it, embraced it, and allowed it to become a part of the performance rather than a hindrance. This was a moment of self-discovery as much as it was a performance. A chance to see what she was truly capable of when she trusted herself fully. The memory of her first applause returned to her, but this time it was amplified in her mind by the energy in the room. She did not need validation from others. The subtle shift in perception around her confirmed that her music had made an impact. People were no longer focused on what she might lack. They were witnessing what she had cultivated over years of dedication. That realization brought a quiet sense of satisfaction, not pride, but acknowledgement of the effort and love she had invested in her art. As she continued, she felt a deep connection to every aspect of the piece. The dynamics, the tempo changes, the intricate patterns all became extensions of her thoughts and emotions. She was not merely performing, she was living the music, allowing it to guide her, to tell a story that had been waiting to be shared. The audience, though silent, was experiencing the music alongside her. Feeling the emotion and dedication she poured into each note by the end of this part of her journey, she understood that talent alone was not enough to navigate the pressures of the moment. It was the combination of preparation, experience, emotional connection, and the courage to face unexpected challenges that allowed her to succeed. She had tapped into all of these elements, creating a performance that was both technically skilled and deeply human. She had proven, primarily to herself, that she could rise to any occasion when she allowed her preparation and passion to guide her. This part of her story was about more than just music. It was about remembering where she came from, acknowledging the quiet hours of practice, and realizing the strength that comes from dedication. It was about understanding that pressure and doubt are natural, but they do not define one's abilities. By facing them and trusting herself, she could transform fear into expression and hesitation into artistry. The music had carried her through, revealing not only her skill, but also her resilience, determination, and the authenticity. The moment she pressed the first key, the room changed. The notes, soft and deliberate at first, carried a quiet authority that caught everyone off guard. People had been expecting hesitation, a faltering start, perhaps even embarrassment. Instead, they heard precision, care, and something deeper, sincerity that demanded attention. Even those who had doubted her began to sit a little straighter, their eyes fixed on her hands as they danced across the keys. Her fingers moved with confidence now, each note flowing into the next, creating a tapestry of sound that seemed to fill the space. The complex piece, which had loomed over her like a challenge, became a story. Each measure told a part of her journey. From the lonely hours spent practicing in silence to the quiet determination that had shaped her understanding of music, the music was alive, breathing with emotion, and the room felt as though it was holding its breath to listen. As she played, she could feel a connection forming, almost tangible, between her and the listeners. The people who had come expecting entertainment or distraction found themselves drawn into something unexpected. The piece was difficult, yes, but it was more than that. It was honest, reflective, and full of heart. Each chord, each transition, carried meaning. And those who were paying attention began to realize that they were witnessing a talent that could not be ignored. Her initial nervousness had faded, replaced by a focus so sharp it felt almost natural. The years of practice, the struggles, and the quiet moments alone with the piano had prepared her for this. Every time her fingers moved, they recalled the lessons learned through repetition, patience, and self-discipline. She had learned not just to play, but to feel the music, to allow it to guide her hands, to make it an expression of who she was inside. The audience began to react, subtly at first. Eyes widened, brows lifted, and a few people exchanged glances of surprise and admiration. The energy in the room shifted. What had started as curiosity or doubt now became respect and fascination. The music demanded their attention, and they could feel the authenticity behind it. They were no longer observers, hoping for entertainment. They were witnesses to something genuine, something rare. She could sense the shift and allowed it to fuel her performance. The complex passages, which had seemed daunting, now felt like opportunities to express herself further. Her fingers moved with agility, executing rapid sequences and intricate patterns with precision. Yet, it was not only skill that carried her. Performance it was emotion. The subtle inflections and dynamics that brought the piece to life. Every crescendo, every soft passage was deliberate, shaped by years of practice and deep understanding of the music's intent. As the piece continued, she felt a strange kind of exhilaration. There was a rhythm to the room now, a quiet engagement that made her feel supported even without words. The tension that had been present at the start had transformed into a shared energy, a silent acknowledgement between performer and audience. She played not for approval but for connection, and in doing so, she found herself more fully immersed in the music than ever before. Her mind moved effortlessly through the notes. Recalling every practice session that had led to this moment, she remembered the frustration of making the same mistake repeatedly and the satisfaction of finally mastering a difficult section. She recalled the guidance of her early teacher, who had emphasized the importance of emotion and honesty over perfection. All of these experiences coalesced in her performance, shaping each phrase, each chord, each nuanced touch of the keys. As the melody progressed, the listeners began to lean in. Drawn by the growing intensity and subtlety of the music, the piece required both technical skill and interpretive depth, and she was delivering both. The initial surprise on their faces was now replaced by genuine admiration. Some closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. Others whispered quietly to neighbors, acknowledging the unexpected talent before them. She did not notice them, of course. Her focus was entirely on the piano, on the music, and on conveying the story hidden within it. She felt a deep sense of freedom as she navigated the more difficult passages. The notes seemed to flow naturally, almost as if the piano itself was guiding her hands. The complexity that had intimidated her before was now a canvas for expression. Each sequence of keys allowed her to convey emotion, to tell a story without speaking, and to reach the hearts of those listening. The room was no longer a place of pressure, but a space of possibility, where music bridged the gap between performer and audience. There were moments of challenge, moments when a particularly difficult passage tested her focus, but she did not falter. She had learned through years of solitary practice that mistakes were not failures. They were chances to grow, to adapt, to improvise if necessary. Her confidence in her abilities allowed her to navigate these moments with grace, turning potential obstacles into opportunities for further expression. The music began to change in tone, moving from reflective passages to more energetic sections. Her hands moved faster now, fingers flying across the keys with precision and agility. Yet even in these rapid sequences, there was control and intention. Every note had meaning, and every phrase was deliberate. The audience could sense the mastery and the care, the way she balanced technical skill with emotional depth. They were not just hearing a performance, they were experiencing it, feeling it in a way that transcended words. The room's atmosphere was almost electric. People were captivated, drawn into the ebb and flow of the music. The initial expectation that she might fail had completely vanished. There was no longer skepticism, no amusement at her expense and attention, respect, and a growing appreciation for the talent unfolding before them. Each note seemed to reinforce the truth that had been hidden, that the quiet girl at the piano possessed a gift far greater than anyone had anticipated. She allowed herself to feel the power of the music, to immerse fully in the performance. The connection between her and the piano, between the music and the audience, was profound. She was no longer simply playing notes. She was conveying her story, her dedication, and her passion. Every chord resonated with her own journey. Every passage echoed the hours of practice and the challenges she had overcome. This was the truth about her talent, emerging in a way that words could never capture. As the piece approached its climax, she felt a surge of emotion. The music became more intense, more expressive, and more demanding. She embraced it, letting the energy flow through her fingers and into the room. The audience was fully engaged now, each person captivated by the unfolding narrative. They could sense the authenticity and depth of the performance, the skill, and the heart behind every note. It was a moment of shared experience, a recognition that something rare and extraordinary was happening. Her confidence had reached a peak. The initial nervousness and fear were long gone, replaced by a quiet certainty. She knew she was capable, and she trusted in her preparation and instincts. The music carried her forward, guiding her through the final sections of the piece with precision and emotion. Each note was deliberate, each phrase intentional, and the room responded with a palpable sense of admiration and awe. By the time she reached the final measures, the audience was completely absorbed. They were no longer passive observers. They were participants in the experience, feeling the emotion and dedication she had poured into every moment. The complex piece, which had seemed daunting at first, had become a medium for connection, for revelation, and for the emergence of her true talent. It was a testament to her perseverance, her skill, and her ability to rise to the occasion when faced with unexpected pressure. As she struck the final chord, letting it resonate and fade, there was a moment of silence. The room held its breath, suspended in the aftermath of the performance. It was a silence filled with recognition, admiration, and the quiet understanding that they had witnessed something special. She sat there, still at the piano, feeling the weight of the moment and the truth of her talent emerging fully. In that instant, she realized that the first notes had already begun to change everything. The doubts, the expectations, the skepticism, they had all been replaced by acknowledgement and respect. The audience had seen her not as someone forced into a challenge, but as someone whose skill and dedication demanded recognition. The music had revealed her true self, her ability, the depth of her commitment. The experience was transformative, not just for the audience, but for her as well. She had faced the pressure and uncertainty, and in doing so, had allowed her talent to shine. The first notes had been tentative, but they had grown into a declaration of who she was, a revelation of the truth about her abilities, and a connection with everyone in the room. The performance was no longer simply about playing a piano piece. It was about courage, honesty, and the power of music to convey what words cannot. As the room began to respond, applause starting softly and growing steadily, she felt a quiet satisfaction. She had shared herself, her years of practice, and her love of music in a way that was genuine and impactful. The audience's reaction confirmed what she had always known deep down. Her talent was real, her dedication was true, and her ability to rise to unexpected challenges was a reflection of the effort, passion, and resilience she had cultivated over years of quiet work. This part of her journey marked a turning point. The first notes had not only changed the room, but it also changed her own perception of herself. She understood that pressure could be transformed into opportunity, that doubt could be met with skill and honesty, and that talent, when combined with preparation and courage, could emerge even in the most unexpected circumstances. The truth about her talent had begun to shine, and it was only just the beginning of a story that would continue to unfold in ways she could not yet imagine. As the music reached its middle passages, something remarkable began to happen. The room, once filled with whispers and skeptical glances, now resonated with a shared energy. Each note she played seemed to draw people closer, not physically but mentally and emotionally. The complex sequences, which had once threatened to intimidate her, now flowed naturally with clarity and strength. Every chord, every phrase, carried intention. A reflection of years spent mastering not just the notes but the emotion behind them. She could feel herself becoming more confident with every passing moment. The fear and doubt that had initially gripped her were fading, replaced by a quiet certainty. She was no longer thinking about impressing anyone or meeting expectations. She was playing from her heart. The music was a conversation, a story she was telling without words, and the audience could sense it. Their attention was no longer casual. They were captivated, caught in the current of her expression. Unable to look away, the complexity of the piece demanded precision. But it also allowed her to inject nuance and subtlety. She explored the soft, introspective sections with tenderness, allowing the audience to feel the vulnerability and thoughtfulness in each note. The louder, more dramatic passages showcased her technical skill, her ability to control the instrument and navigate its challenges with grace. The balance between these extremes made the performance dynamic, engaging, and deeply human. The room was no longer just a collection of spectators. It was a space alive with emotion, and she was at the center of it. She remembered all the private moments of practice that had prepared her for this. The nights she had spent alone, replaying difficult sections, listening critically, correcting mistakes, and learning to trust her instincts, all of it had led to this moment. Each struggle she had overcome became evident in the confidence and fluidity of her playing. She realized that talent was important, but dedication and resilience were just as crucial. The audience was now witnessing the culmination of not just skill, but the perseverance and passion that fueled her music. The reactions in the room were subtle but unmistakable. People leaned forward slightly, absorbed by the intricacies of her performance. Faces that had once been skeptical now reflected awe and admiration. She noticed small gestures, a nod of approval, a faint smile, eyes glistening with emotion. These were not mere polite responses. They were the natural reaction of people who were moved by something genuine, something that transcended mere entertainment. She had never experienced this level of connection before, and it was profoundly moving as she moved through the more challenging parts of the composition. She allowed herself to take risks. The fast passages required precision and timing, and she executed them with confidence, letting her instincts guide her. The audience could sense the mastery in her hands. The combination of technical skill and emotional depth that elevated the performance. Every note was deliberate, every transition meaningful, and the energy in the room responded accordingly. It was as if the music had its own life. She was both the creator and the messenger. The piece also required her to express a range of emotions, from delicate introspection to bold intensity. She embraced this fully, letting the music reflect the complexity of her own experiences. There were moments of quiet reflection, passages that demanded a softer touch, a gentleness that revealed vulnerability. Then there were moments of power and intensity, where the force of the music mirrored her determination and strength. The dynamic contrast kept the audience engaged. The emotional honesty behind it resonated deeply with everyone present. She noticed that the energy in the room was changing. People who had been distracted or doubtful were now completely absorbed. They were no longer merely watching, they were listening, feeling, and responding in ways that could not be expressed in words. She could sense the shared experience, the unspoken acknowledgement that they were witnessing something rare. The music had broken down barriers, transforming a room of strangers into participants in a unique, intimate moment. Her own awareness of the audience's reaction gave her a quiet boost, but she did not rely on it for validation. The focus remained on the music and the story it conveyed. She played with intention, letting the technical demands of the piece blend seamlessly with the emotional narrative. This combination of skill and expression made the performance compelling, immersive, and unforgettable. Every note was a testament to her preparation, her talent, and the depth of her commitment. As the composition approached its later sections, she felt a sense of momentum. The earlier tension had transformed into fluidity, and the music flowed effortlessly through her hands. The transitions between passages, once intimidating, now felt natural and expressive. She was in complete control, fully present, and entirely absorbed in the performance. The audience, in turn, was captivated, hanging on each phrase. Feeling the ebb and flow of the music as it unfolded, the realization began to settle in. The truth about her talent was emerging, undeniable and clear. She had been underestimated, pushed into a situation that could have exposed weakness, yet she had risen above it. The room was no longer a place of judgment or expectation. It was a space where her skill, dedication, and emotional honesty were recognized. Every note, every phrase reinforced the reality that she possessed something extraordinary, something that could not be ignored, even in the quiet moments of the piece. When the tempo slowed and the music became reflective, the audience remained attentive. They were absorbing the subtleties, appreciating the layers of emotion, and recognizing the depth of her interpretation. The music communicated what words could not: years of practice, moments of struggle, and the resilience that had carried her to this moment. It was a revelation, both for her and for those listening, that talent and dedication, when combined with authenticity, could create a powerful impact. She felt a profound connection to the instrument, to the music, and to the people in the room. The piano was not just a tool, it was a partner, an extension of her thoughts and emotions. Each chord resonated with meaning, each passage conveyed intention. The room had transformed from a place of potential embarrassment into a space of shared experience and recognition. The audience was no longer anticipating failure. They were witnessing excellence and heart, and their reactions reflected it. As she navigated the final, climactic passages of the piece, the audience was completely absorbed. There was a sense of anticipation, a collective holding of breath as the music built toward its conclusion. She played with precision, control, and emotional intensity, allowing the culmination of the composition to reflect both her technical skill and the honesty of her expression. The room was alive with the resonance of her music, and the truth of her talent could no longer be denied. When she struck the final chord, letting it linger and fade into silence, the impact of her performance settled over the room. There was a pause, a moment of collective realization, before the first reactions emerged. Faces that had once held doubt now showed admiration, respect, and amazement. The music had revealed the full extent of her ability, and it was undeniable. The truth about her talent had emerged in a way that was both powerful and transformative. In that moment, she understood that the challenge she had faced, the pressure she had felt, and the initial doubts were all part of the journey. They had tested her, pushed her to her limits, and allowed her to demonstrate not only skill, but resilience, authenticity, and courage. The audience's reaction was a reflection of the truth she had always known deep down, that her talent was real, deep and capable of inspiring recognition and admiration. The room gradually began to respond with applause, first softly, then growing into a wave of appreciation. She remained seated, letting the sound wash over her, understanding that this was not just acknowledgement of the performance, but recognition of the years of dedication, practice, and passion that had led to this moment. The applause was meaningful, genuine, and deserved, and it affirmed the truth that had emerged through her music. This part of her journey marked a turning point. The music had fully conveyed the depth of her talent, revealing the skill, emotion, and dedication that had been cultivated quietly over the years. She had faced a challenge that could have intimidated anyone, yet she had embraced it and allowed her true ability to shine. The room, once filled with doubt, had transformed into a space of recognition, respect, and admiration, and she had discovered within herself a profound confidence and clarity as she rose from the piano. She carried with her a quiet understanding. The truth about her talent had emerged not through words, not through explanation, but through the honesty and authenticity of her performance. She had faced the pressure, embraced the complexity, and shared her music in a way that was human, relatable, and deeply moving. The audience's realization was complete, and the story of her skill and dedication had been told, leaving a lasting impression on everyone who had been present. This moment was a testament to the power of perseverance, the importance of preparation, and the ability of music to convey truth. She had discovered not only the extent of her own capabilities, but also the impact that authenticity and dedication could have on others. The performance had revealed her talent fully, transforming both her understanding of herself and the perception of those around her. The truth had emerged undeniable and profound, and it would shape the rest of her journey in ways she could only begin to imagine. As the final notes faded, the room was enveloped in a heavy, almost reverent silence. Every eye was fixed on her, and every person felt the weight of what had just transpired. The complex piano piece, once thought impossible for her to perform, had been executed with precision, emotion, and an undeniable depth. She remained seated, breathing steadily, letting the final resonance linger, allowing the audience to absorb the entirety of the performance before any sound disturbed the moment. For a heartbeat, no one moved. It was as though the room itself paused, holding a collective breath, acknowledging the quiet power of what had been witnessed. She could feel their attention, their admiration, but she did not seek it. She had played not for applause, not for approval, but because it was the only way she could express the years of dedication, the countless hours of practice, and the struggles she had faced alone. The truth of her talent had emerged, and in that silence, it was undeniable.